welcome to my rewrite of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. But anyway, just like with my Phantom Menace rewrite video, I will go over some of my major problems of this movie as I go on, since, just like with the Phantom Menace, I'm pretty sure most people who have already seen this movie know what I'm talking about. Weirdly though, just like the Phantom Menace, I think the opening scene of Attack of the Clones works just fine, except for a few clunky exposition lines that should have been cut out. After seeing this version of the credits, you're probably wondering why I changed it so that the Republic was already aware of the clone army. It's because upon my rewatch of this movie for this video, I realized that the mystery behind the clone army is almost completely pointless. Now when it comes to the dialogue of this movie, I think it's kind of like the Phantom Menace, where I think some of it is fine on a purely script level, but with that said, Anakin easily has the worst lines in the movie, and I'm not just talking about the line about Senate. Anyway, in this version we see where Padme meets up with Palpatine and comforts her about the failed attack, but Padme is much colder toward him since she disapproves heavily of the creation of the clone army in the first place. This, on top of being a resident of Naboo, she is insulted by his seeming willingness to seek out war instead of peace. Palpatine makes an effort to try and make Padme see things from his point of view. While he claims to love peace, he is not naive. He points out that the Trade Federation joined the Separatists, so whatever sympathy he might have had for them is gone. And he tells Padme that she should not waste sympathy on those who do not deserve it. After that, the scene where Obi-Wan and Anakin meet up with Padme still happens. On a minor note, Jar Jar Binks in the scene will be replaced by Boss Nass. But moving on. Now, I have heard that one of the reasons Anakin's lines around Padme are so weird and awkward is that since he has lived in the Jedi Temple his whole life, his social skills weren't exactly well developed. And yeah, I can see where people are coming from, but I still think that could have been conveyed in a way that did not make Anakin come across as a Twilight character. One notable change in this movie is that there will be an additional scene right before the one where Padme gets assassinated again, where she tries to make a final plea to end the war with the Separatists before it can even begin to the Galactic Senate. There are a few members of the Senate who support her case, but there are a few more who are against it. This will then lead to an intense debate with Kamino's representatives regarding the clone army's manufacturing. This will all come to a head when Padme makes one final demand to strike an arrangement with several of the leading heads of the separatist movement to see if a peaceful resolution can be reached. The other senators scorn and mock this suggestion, but Palpatine appears more accepting of it and allows Padme to send the message to the separatist leaders. After this, we get to the scene where Sam Wessel attempts to assassinate Amidala. The difference, other than the chase sequence being significantly trimmed down, is that when Jango Fett silences her, Sam is just able to mutter the name Darth Tyrannus before she dies. Obi-Wan says he does not know, but he does mention that before she died, Sam Wessel did mention the name Darth Tyrannus, which seems to confirm that Darth Maul was not the Master. The Council then receives a request from Supreme Chancellor Palpatine to have Obi-Wan escort him to Kamino to inspect the clone troopers for security's sake, to which the Jedi Council acquiesces. Meanwhile, Padme is holding a meeting with the Separatist leaders, but she is not having much success in swaying their minds. She can, however, get them to agree to a personal meeting, but not on Naboo, but on Bail Organa's home planet, Alderaan. And yes, I did steal this from Belated Media Productions' Attack of the Clones rewrite video. I usually try to come up with my own ideas for rewrites, but this is such a good one that I couldn't help myself. But besides that, I think this change would work because in universe, it would make more sense to go to a different planet to hide from assassins than just your native one. But the other reason is that it gives a much clearer picture of what Alderaan was like before the Death Star blew it up in Episode 4 A New Hope. The one other thing I will give credit is that I do think there is a solid enough base for a relationship between Anakin and Padme, since they are both kind of similar, but also different in a strange way. Let me explain. They both want peace and are both put in positions where they have to safeguard or put aside their feelings, so having both of them be the only ones that they can truly confide in is already a good base to work off of. Just thought I'd mention that. Other than that, since the clone army is no longer a mystery, the scenes with Obi-Wan searching for Kamino will be cut, which does sadly cost us the Jedi Archives meme. Instead, those scenes will be replaced with ones where Padme and a few Republic senators are discussing the tenuous peace in the galaxy. A lot of the Separatists express both their concerns and in some ways, frustrations with both the Republic and by extension the Jedi. both in how they have failed to settle disputes on their planets and how they have failed to provide any substantial aid in any other capacity. Padme does agree with their complaints, but is interrupted by a representative of the Trade Federation who still blames the Republic for the death of Newt Gunray. In case you haven't seen my rewrite of The Phantom Menace, I had Darth Maul kill Newt Gunray for insubordination. While this is happening, Palpatine arrives in Kamino escorted by Obi-Wan, where they are given a presentation of the clone troopers, including the bounty hunter Jango Fett, but without his armor, so Obi-Wan does not initially recognize him, like in the original. During the presentation, Palpatine asks the Kaminoan leaders as to what precautions have been made to ensure that the clones themselves will remain loyal to the Republic, since they are not droids. The Kaminoan leaders assure him that all clones have been conditioned since their conception to follow whomever sits on the Supreme Chancellor's chair at the moment, including a series of 150 total Supreme Orders that only the Chancellor can give them. Obi-Wan takes this opportunity to ask Jango about who could have hired and then subsequently silenced Sam Wessel. Jango shrugs and says he doesn't know what he's talking about and leaves. Obi-Wan returns to the tour with Palpatine, who out of the blue asks Obi-Wan how Anakin is doing. Obi-Wan is surprised that Palpatine would concern himself with him. Palpatine responds that he recognizes Anakin's potential, even going so far as to suggest that he could be the chosen one from the prophecy. Obi-Wan dismisses this idea, but part of him can't help but wonder if what Palpatine says might be true, especially when Palpatine asks if the reason he never considered it is because he secretly did think of it as a possibility, but never pursued it because he was jealous. Obi-Wan changes the subject, saying that he suspects that Jango Fett might know or even be the same bounty hunter who hired and killed Sam Wessel. While this is happening, we see the scene where Anakin gets the visions of his mother in danger. He leaves for Tatooine initially without telling Padme, but he is caught and then he explains himself to Padme. Due to the deeper relationship that has been built between them, she permits him to leave. When Anakin returns to Tatooine, he has an uneasy reunion with Watto, his former owner. There he finds out that Owen-Lars's dad, Klieg, had freed Shmi quite a while ago. In case you missed it, in my rewrite of The Phantom Menace, I had it so that Owen and Anakin were childhood friends. After we get a scene with the two of them bonding, we cut to a different scene where Obi-Wan is planting a bug on Jango Fett's ship. He waits patiently in his own starfighter until a transmission from Jango's ship plays. A hooded figure referring to themselves as Darth Tyrannus tries to negotiate a deal with Jango. After the transmission ends, Obi-Wan sends a message to both Mace Windu and Yoda, confirming that after all these years they finally have a lead on the second Sith Lord. Mace Windu tells Obi-Wan to go where the signal was coming from. Obi-Wan bows and heads towards Geonosis. We cut back to Anakin on Tatooine as he sneaks into the Tusken Raider camp. Everything plays out the same, except for when he snaps and he's about to kill a group of children, but he stops himself and leaves the village in flames behind. After he arrives back at Owen's farm, they have a funeral for Shmi and bury her next to Klieg, after which Anakin has an emotional breakdown in front of Owen, the two of them hug each other, and Anakin heads back to Alderaan. Back to Obi-Wan, who has now arrived on Geonosis. He sneaks into a giant mountain base where he spies on another group of Separatist officials who are having a meeting with Count Dooku. Obi-Wan is shocked to find Qui-Gon's master still alive, to the point where after the meeting is finished, Count Dooku, without looking up, tells him to come down from that hiding spot. Obi-Wan jumps down from behind Dooku, and Dooku greets him as if they were back at the Jedi Temple, and invites him to sit. The two of them have a long conversation, first about Qui-Gon Jinn and the state of the galaxy at large. The conversation then turns to Anakin. Obi-Wan says that he has been doing okay, but admits that he isn't confident in his abilities as a master compared to Qui-Gon, thinking that perhaps he was knighted too early back in The Phantom Menace. He asks Dooku how he is still alive, having saw that he had perished long ago. Count Dooku tells Obi-Wan that how he survived is not relevant. What is relevant is that he now has a greater understanding of the Force than the Jedi could have ever achieved. Obi-Wan initially asks if he was Darth Maul's master, but reasons that there's no way he could have kept that hidden. Therefore, the only explanation that makes any sense is that Darth Maul had a different master who indoctrinated Dooku. Dooku smiles and says that Qui-Gon would have been proud. They engage in a fierce duel, where at first Obi-Wan appears to be on even footing with Dooku, until Dooku blasts him with force lightning until Obi-Wan is unconscious. Back on Alderaan, Anakin arrives back to join Padme with her negotiations. However, they receive a holographic message from Count Dooku himself with an unconscious Obi-Wan behind him, saying the Republic sent him there to assassinate him. This leads to an intense battle between the Separatist guards and the Alderaanian guards. Anakin does well at first until Jango attacks out of nowhere. At first they seem to even each other out in different ways, until Jango uses an underhanded trick and shoots Anakin with a knockout dart. We get a scene in the Galactic Senate where Palpatine makes a statement revealing that they have confirmed reports that Obi-Wan Kenobi has been kidnapped by the former Jedi, now Separatist figurehead, Count Dooku. He uses this information as definitive proof that the Separatists cannot be reasoned with and that they have no choice but to strike as fast as possible. After this, the majority of the Senate agrees to okay the launch of the clone army, and Palpatine says they will launch their attack on Geonosis at once. After this, there will be a scene where Palpatine sends a message to the Jedi Council. The Jedi express their concerns, mostly Yoda, about how entering this war could lead to more conflict, and thus going against the Jedi Code. Mace Windu points out that given the state of things, it would have been unavoidable no matter what, and agrees to lead the first attack on Geonosis. On Geonosis, we see Anakin and Padme awake to find themselves in the Geonosian arena. From this point on, everything else that happened in the movie still plays out the same, with Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan fighting in the arena against the Beast and the Jedi coming in to rescue. The only major difference besides Mace Windu appearing in the gunship instead of Yoda will be that Count Dooku tells Jango that he will increase his pay by 10% for each Jedi that he kills. Jango flies down and starts killing Jedi left and right, using the fact that they are surrounded by battle droids to his advantage. However, he is intercepted by Anakin instead of Mace Windu. They fight for a good bit, but this time Anakin is much more prepared and he kills Jango by leaping up above him and cuts into his jetpack, which causes it to explode. But besides that, everything else remains the same, like the charge against the Separatist forces, the fight between Dooku, Anakin, and Obi-Wan, Yoda steps in to fight off Dooku, and Dooku escapes. The only scene that will be omitted will be the one where Dooku meets up with Darth Sidious. After this, there will be a scene where Yoda and Mace Windu are discussing the upcoming war with Palpatine. He says that he regrets that things had to come to this, but hopefully the Clone Wars will not last too long. He then asks him about updates of the new Sith Lord, Count Dooku, now Darth Tyrannus, and asks whether or not he had anything to do with Darth Maul, who helped occupy his home planet. Obi-Wan confirms that there is no way that Dooku could have been Darth Maul's mentor, so whoever Darth Maul's mentor actually is still out there. Palpatine nods and then asks Obi-Wan if he has told Anakin about the prophecy. Both Mace Windu and Yoda initially dismissed the idea that Anakin could be the chosen one, but this time Obi-Wan decides to vouch for Anakin, pointing out his skill in the arena and adding that many of the other Jedi who survived were likewise impressed by them. Mace and Yoda eventually agree to have Anakin knighted, but conclude that it'd be best not to tell him so it doesn't go to his head. After this, we get an almost identical scene to my rewrite of The Phantom Menace, where Obi-Wan became knighted, but instead it's Anakin. Before the last scene of this version of the movie, there will be another one where Anakin has one last meeting with Padme before his first battle. Anakin asks her what's wrong. Padme admits that she has tried to prove to the rest of the Senate that the Separatists did not try to provoke them into war, even knowing that at this point it's hopeless. Anakin then asks if not, then why was Obi-Wan captured, and even if not, then them appointing Dooku as their figurehead should prove their guilt. Padme says that she doesn't have an answer and cries. Anakin comforts her and assures her that, now that he has been knighted, he will fight for the peace that they both dreamed of, and they both kiss. The final scene of this movie will be of Anakin heading off into his first battle of the clone.